What is happening?
Talk shit. Recorded live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the
Oh, my phone.
Uh-oh.
Why did... See what Jarvis did there? Welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the July 10th, 2015 show, and we're having a special panel tonight talking with women about their perspectives in science fiction literature, art, music, all of the genres, and where their perspective differs from men. With me tonight, we have four special guests. We have Kenyeda Adams.
Hi.
Tanece Brooks.
Hello.
Jarvis, mute yourself, please. We have Rasheedah Prioleau.
Hi.
And Ellen Gibson.
Hello.
Okay, those are our panelists for tonight. We're going to be discussing basically women's perspective in sci-fi. And I think the biggest place to start is I'd like to ask the four of you to, take turns telling where you see, if you see, a difference in a male perspective in story construction, in the stories told, and the difference between men and women, because it's noticeable to me. But again, I have that Y chromosome, so we're really interested in hearing what you guys think. So why don't I can't even do the alphabetical thing. I guess that would be Kenyeda would be first. But Kenyeda, if you've noticed a difference, and you've noticed a difference in perspective between the way male writers, and let's stick with black writers, black male writers and black female writers tell their stories, what would it be?
The difference? Well, first off, I'm getting complaints from the chat that some people can't hear. And second, I guess if I'm talking about the perspective that, what would be the difference? I guess me as female, I've noticed that the female body tends to have a weird place in sci-fi when we have a male writer writing for female characters. And with black writers particularly, it's a really weird, they don't necessarily treat women's bodies and what they're capable of with the same amount of dignity that they would treat another male body. And with black writers, I think we tend to focus more on stories about people, and our stories tend to be more focused about community building or reclaiming of community, as opposed to a non-African American perspective where it's about conquest or even consequences of conquest.
So it's more humanistic rather than competitive.
Right.
And as far as the way women are treated by men, you feel that maybe they're hypersexualized?
Well, not just hypersexualized. Like, for example, when the way science fiction handles pregnancy, for example, is really not necessarily a positive means or a positive projection. Like, if you think of Star Trek or any of, like, the fantasy sci-fi shows where you see the women being forcefully impregnated or they're having demon babies or any, pregnancy in and of itself and motherhood is it's a commodity for, drama or, played up for laughs, as opposed to, being treated as a really human and even sometimes sacred situation and thing. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it does. And what about you, Tanece?
I have to agree with what Kenyeda was saying, because I read a lot of comic books, and I read a lot of things that are sci-fi and fantasy, and so especially when it's like a black male in science fiction, a lot of the times when it's a visual kind of thing, they focus on hypersexualized bodies for women, and that just goes beyond color. That's just for any woman that's in the combo, especially for women
right.
who are of color. It's very hypersexualized. And you can see the clear difference between when it's a male writer and a male artist and a female artist. Like there's totally different, like big differences between it. And so it's an interesting thing. And like Kenyeda said, I just have to agree with. Like there's just a really big difference about it. As far as writing goes, it's also, I kind of have to agree with what she said too, with when it's a black writer, I've noticed too, it's not about conquest. It's always about, well, not always about, but it's always about like coming together as a community or trying to make a change for the difference or doing something better. It's not about, oh, we're going to go take over that planet. Very rarely have I seen that from like black science fiction or black science fantasy. You know what I'm saying? So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what about you, Rasheedah?
Well, yeah, I definitely echo what Kenyeda and Tanece are saying. I think, I'm always extremely impressed with how much detail men tend to put into their world building. Just the amount of depth and thought and creativity that they put into like the different species and the different planets and the different areas. But then when it comes down to the actual female characters, they do tend to stay in that traditional role. They're there for, the male's, gratification or something that he needs for, this specific scene or what have you, or it's there to titillate on the cover. It doesn't tend to, they can't kind of push past that and make the female equal to the male.
And finally, Ellen, what have you noticed?
Well, yeah, I agree with all the other ladies. I agree that there is an objectification of women in the sci-fi genre.
Mm-hmm.
There's also marginalization, and then there's an element that a lot of the African-American male writers, they leave out a lot of emotional, like the emotional side of like what's going on. Like they could be in danger, but we don't we don't feel what the character is feeling. A lot of the African-American male writers don't really get into like a deep POV, like a deep point of view of the characters, except for you, William, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm currently reading your novel now. But I just really noticed that. It's more like, let's go out there and kick butt, not really like the emotional side, like the human side. Like we want to know, like I know as a female reader, I like to know what the character is feeling, what they're thinking, like so I can feel like I'm there with them or I am the character in some aspects.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm missing with a lot of characters. Like Rasheedah pointed out, the women are there, I guess, to serve instead of being an independent character of their own and having their own agenda instead of going along with the male agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, none of you are really old, older, in terms of, well, you're just not older, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I'm wondering, is the lack of good writing of female characters and also dealing with issues that are maybe more humanistic, could that just be, a traditional inexperience that men have generally toward women? I mean, there's a whole lot stop and think about all the bad, guys who walked up to you in a club and said something that was so inappropriate, you just shook your head and go, well, how can you not know that that's insulting to a woman? And so I'm wondering if the divide between sexes is the main reason for why men don't tackle those subject areas very well. What do you guys think? Any of you can talk. Go ahead.
I think so, because even as Ellen, I think, was talking about how a lot of males don't focus on like the emotional side of things in their writing or whatever they're producing. I think that has to go in with how even as we're raised, men are always told, hey, don't be all that emotional kind of stuff, while women are told we're emotional. You know what I'm saying? I think that also feeds into how we portray ourselves in anything that we do. So a lot of the times when a man writes something like that or even deals with that, and why even now they don't seem to deal with it as we would deal with it, I think it's because of how we're, taught to grow up, how we're taught basically in our world and how we're all supposed to be, stereotyped. So I think that's just bleeding into whatever we do a lot of the time. And it's really hard to break that when you just hear that over and over and over again. You know what I'm saying? You have to actually make leaps and bounds to get over that sort of stereotyping to, increase the goodness of your work. So that's what I was thinking.
Yes, I agree with Tanece on that note. There definitely is a training there, but I also think it's also a money issue too, in that books with the titillation and the objectification, unfortunately, just like with TV shows, those sell. I mean, perfect example being the paranormal romance that are big right now, and the no offense to paranormal romance or anything like that. I love paranormal romance myself. But with the paranormal romance, with 50 Shades of Grey, all these things, the objectification unfortunately sells. The stories where you see women as characters and having stories and lives outside of the male protagonist, or the females may be the protagonist, it's only really recently becoming a light that female leads are seen as profitable. Hence your Divergence, your Mockingjays and your Hunger Games and those sorts of stories. They're only just being seen as marketable. So it's now starting to come out with your Miss Marvel and all of the other female comic books or heroes who are finally getting the spotlight. And so I think it's those two issues that are intertwined. And now we just have to kind of push to get better, more in-depth representation besides what we've got and keep it going.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But then there's also, like you mentioned, Twilight and Divergent, and what is the other one? Hunger Games?
Hunger Games. 50 Shades.
Yeah, those are all like a YA, I guess. I consider YA. There's also the characters in those stories, even though I think they're all written by women, they still have an objectification of females, especially Twilight, that whole series. Bella, the character Bella, if you really look at the story, she was in a very abusive relationship.
That's exactly what it was.
Both of them. I was just mentioning them as just examples of what's popular right now. I said nowhere did I say that they were good stories or even good characters.
I agree. I was just mentioning that because we were just talking about how the female characters are displayed, and it's like they make it seem like they kind of glorify these abusive relationships and like women are objectified.
It's not healthy. Like, don't do that. Sorry, continue.
No, I agree. And then young girls are looking up to this, and I think I was just watching, I guess, one of the news channels, and they had, it was actually Dr. Phil, and there was a young lady on there, like she was, I guess, around the age of people who read these stories, and she was on there because her video went viral for kind of promoting domestic violence, like saying it's okay for her boyfriend to hit her. And I'm seeing all these stories out there, it's kind of, they're promoting that type of lifestyle to young girls. And we as female writers, we need to write something different.
Well, that's kind of like two different subjects. I mean, obviously, women treat their creative endeavors differently than men do. They write different kinds of stories. But in terms of things like popular culture, entertainment, and television, you have two things going on. First, you have, for the most part, the money behind it is, from men. Second of all, most of the producers are men. And third of all, they write it to be popular. And in order to get the numbers, they have to do certain things, things that we find cheap, tawdry. We've all sat here and talked about how something was written and it was just BS because they did it for and fill in your own cheesy reason. They did it for the money. Oh, they just showed the bosoms for the breasts for the guys. Oh, they just did this. And the thing is when you guys go and all of you craft stories, when you think about stories to tell, I don't think the first thing in your mind is, how am I going to put some breasts in this so I can sell it to men?
Yeah, hadn't crossed my mind
Yeah,
yet.
that's never kind of mind, ever.
Never, ever.
Not once. Never, ever. And it's so funny you say that because even when I write, a lot of my characters are women, so it's like there's breasts in here, but not in the way that a man would go, ooh, I want to buy this because there's boobs all over the cover. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, it's actually funny. It's actually funny, and I think it's a men versus women thing here because when I'm writing about women, yes, you don't think about breasts. You think, okay, female, breasts automatically go with that. You don't think farther than that. It's just like it's a thing.
Yeah, that's
right.
exactly
and,
it.
I mean, you guys don't use, that kind of thing for marketing or to sustain a story. Like in a movie, they'll throw a sex scene in because they don't know what else to do, and they know that they'll get. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like your entire focus, your entire creative focus, is very much different from what we see traditionally from men. And so when you put a story together, I've talked to all of you. Some do plot first. Some go, I make a great character, and then I build a story around them and things like that. But again, I don't think, and let's talk books. Let's try to stick with books and stay away from movies because we don't do that many movies. But in terms of books, short stories, comic books, things like that, it appears to me that the big difference is you're interested in putting together a good story. And you don't use as much artifice to cover up a weakness in the story. Like putting in a sex scene just because it has to be there because you don't know what else to do, or as an example, in a movie you don't have a car chase or a bunch of explosions to make up for a lack of story, Michael Bay. So it seems like the focus from the beginning, the creative focus is completely different. And that's what I want you guys to talk about is, what is it that drives a story for each of you, rather than what we would consider, really cheesy, really one-dimensional, really stereotypical crap that we would see in a movie or on television.
So how are we starting this? You're just going around again?
No, just
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
think it's go around again.
You guys are grown-ass women. You can talk with each other. Go ahead.
I guess for me, it's definitely characters for me because if you got a good character and a character that's got something they want and somewhere to go, your story is pretty much going to write itself, and you're going to make sure that you are crafting a character that your audience is going to care about. Because you care about them. Not necessarily, they might not care about all the same reasons, but at least you will make them real enough that somebody might actually care what happens to them at the end of the day. You lose that and you lose the story altogether. And plus, for me, sci-fi is the way to explore the human condition through allegories that don't necessarily have to be, straight from the heart or straight from home. Whether it's talking about colonization on the alien planet or talking about, fixing overpopulation or combating, injustices. Science fiction is the way to do that. And so the main point of these stories are not necessarily all the technology and the flying spaceships. It's the people that are utilizing these things. So for me, it's characters.
And what about you, Tanece?
Yeah. I have to agree. Whenever I write, it's usually I focus first on characters, and that's what I really build on at first. So as long as I have like a good set of characters, I can do a story about them and make it revolve around them, and it's not hard. And then after characters, it's just I try and tackle something that I see in everyday life or make a social comment about it in the story. So it's not always about, oh, hey, this is a futuristic something, another. No, I try to dig deeper and try and push that in there too, because that's what I like to make those commentaries, because I like to observe things and I like to, kind of voice that, but in a cool kind of, hey, this is a fantasy story, but it's talking about something that, hey, that you can relate to. So as long as I have like relatable characters and something that people can relate to, I it's all good for me. And that's what I have to do with Kenyeda. That's what I do a lot too, with just starting with characters and just, focusing on that. And if I get a cool kind of world out of it, hey, bonus points. So
yep,
that's how I do it.
And Rasheedah, what about you?
I think I do a mixture of character and the world. I think I always start with a question of what haven't I seen already? And I'll maybe list a couple of things. I haven't seen this, and I haven't seen that, and then I'll pick one. I'll say, well, okay, so if this is the world that we're living in, what kind of character would be most interesting here? So I kind of do a mixture of the two, and that way I think they feed off of each other. So what's interesting about the Hunger Games? You have a bunch of kids that's on television, and I think that's
right.
That's something that works really, really well. This is the world, and these are the characters in that world. So that's kind of how I do things. Personally.
And Ellen, do you start with the characters first or the plot first?
I usually, start with, an idea, a question that I would have, and then start building the story and just throw the characters in. I usually have, a set of characters already developed, just waiting for a story. So to make it come together, I guess I'll say, what would happen if this, happened, or if the world was this way, and then trying to craft a story to it, and then add the characters in it. And then the characters will give it more life because you're seeing it from their perspective, how would this person react if this happened? If they were sent off on this planet and they couldn't get home, how would they feel about that? And then the story would, write itself from there.
Yeah, and, not to take anything away from you guys at all, because all of you sound like you're doing, I've read some of the stuff, but, for me, it's completely different. I come up with a story idea and then an ending, especially the ending, and then I just dump in characters as I need them. But I don't. Well, I hope that I think my characters are three-dimensional, and that seems to be very important to you guys too, because it's the relationships to the between the characters that I think drives most of your work, and I think that that's probably. I don't think it's too much to think that is not a sexual characteristic or a gender characteristic rather. Because all of you have said, that the characters rule, and what they do is what drives the story. When you talk about doing character development, do you think of your main character first, build that person up, and then kind of decide how they might work in the story? Let's start with you this time, Ellen, because you said you start with an idea. So if you have your idea, how do you get your characters? Do you think in terms of who's going to be the main character that's going to drive the story?
The idea, I'll just make an example, the idea of being stranded on a distant planet.
Right, yeah, and then, I'm sorry,
I think
go
about
ahead.
the storyline, what would be going on, and then what type of character would the character be, male or female? Would they be older or younger? And how would that work best with what's going on around them? And then that's how I would come up with the character. Which one of them? Like I said, I already have characters in my head that I've already been playing around with and developing. So I was which character would go best with this story? And insert them into the situation and see how they will react to what's going on.
And Rasheedah, you've done excuse me for not remembering, but you've done at least one book.
Right.
And when you started that story, was it completely character driven? Did you say, okay, this is so and so, and I like who she is, I build her up, and then let's see where the story takes it? Or did you also have kind of an idea like Ellen did?
Well, yeah, I definitely had an idea first, and it went through several first and second and third attempts. I think I always find it I think it's kind of scary to start out with the ending, because I feel like if I start knowing the ending, I'm not going to allow my mind to think of something else.
Or read all the way through the book.
I always try to just leave the ending. I'll say I don't know what's going to happen at the end until at least halfway to 3/4 of the way through.
Wow.
But yeah, I'll start with this character, and I'll have to give the character a flaw. That's the main thing. The character has to have a flaw that has to get fixed by the end of the book. And so it's that literary device where the ending is the polar opposite of the beginning. Not totally, but there's something that changes in the character. And so at first I'll know exactly what it is that's got to change about that character, and that kind of helps me push her to the end. The things that she goes through makes her that way.
I joke with her because she revealed to me, Rasheedah revealed to me, that she'll read about halfway through a book, and then if she gets tired of it or wants to know what's going to go on later, she will jump to the end.
I'll do that.
She missed out on a great sex scene in Discovery. That's all I got to say. Okay. So, and Tanece, what is it? I mean, when you create your characters, do you have that storyline kind of laid out, or do you let the characters kind of determine where you're going?
It depends on the story, because sometimes I won't have any idea what I want to do, but at other times I'll be working with these characters, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I want to explore such and such and such for these characters because I was working on them for so long, and I want to delve into maybe their background or maybe how they grew up or how their mindset kind of affects what's happening there. So a lot of times my characters kind of feed off me and give me like, hey, let's work on this with this character since this is the idea I got from them. So that's how I get stories a lot of the time. I don't have just hey, I want to write a story about a science fiction, something or another. I just focus on characters, and from there, that's how I get my plots and everything. So it's solely characters for me, basically. It's how I start everything off. So
right. And Kenyeda, what about you?
For me, I like to start off with questions. So I do love my characters, and usually when I'm planning a story and characters out, I'm usually asking myself, so in my real job, in my day job, I'm a biologist. So, of course, I got to have my questions. So I might be like, let's, some question pops up, like Rasheedah and even Tanece said. Some question pops up, and you're like, okay, that's something fun to explore. Let's explore this. Okay, what character would best fit this? Would they be young? Would they be old? Where would you get a good chance to sort of fill that question out and answer all the facets of that question? And that's where the character, or at least the basics of the characters, come out. And then on top of that, I give them their quirks and their flaws, and I just add things to them that I think will be assets, but they can also be hindrances, which is oftentimes fun when you're thinking of a trait for a person. So, for one of my main characters in the novel that I'm working on, she wants to be a scientist, and so she's curious, so she wants to explore everything, but of course that leads her to trouble because in the major point in the book, she's stuck in the middle of cliffs looking at cliff markings in the middle of a firefight. So curiosity, yes, is a great thing because, she's learning to make her own watches and all this other stuff from scrap that she's found, but now it lands her in trouble because she's out in the middle of nowhere doing things because she's curious about what is there.
Right.
So
and
different problems.
And it's easier for you to write from your personal perspective because it's kind of a discipline that you feel you know well and you control it well in your writing.
Right. Yes. And it just fits better with my brain, writing from a point of questions because cause that's what I do all day. I'm answering questions. So it's easier for me to ask a question and then go, okay, what else fit? What kind of stories can I tell? So going through the sort of 20 questions game, I get a whole story idea out of them. And it also just helps me to kind of continue a story when I get stuck. I've had 2 whole characters pop up simply because I asked questions like, okay, what can fit with this character? How are we going to do this? What's the connection for this? and you realize there's a hole there that needs to be filled, so you fill it.
Wow. Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit, and I'll start in the middle of the group because Rasheedah, I'd like to know, as you were growing up and the kind of reading that you did. I mean, obviously you're drawn to speculative fiction, whether it be sci-fi, fantasy, or horror. But what were the influences that happened early in life that drove you to want to create in speculative fiction?
Well, I have an older brother, and the big guy gets the remote to the television, so it was pretty much science fiction, Star Wars, Star Trek, those types of things. Any he was old. Any VHSs that we got, that's how old I am, would be geared towards the science fiction, and of course he had comic books and music and these types of things. And so sci-fi and speculative fiction was always part of my consciousness. But when it came down to the books that I actually read, those books would come from my mom and my sister, and so those books were more romance geared. And so I guess just growing up, I had just both the speculative fiction and the romance influences just in my brain and as a part of my consciousness, historical romances mainly. So that's kind of what deeply influences my actual writing style.
Mm-hmm. And tell people just a little bit about what you've already written.
So I started out with a science fiction romance series, which, of course, you have your leading Black female characters who are put in very strenuous circumstances in the future. And it's kind of like one lady already said, you're exploring social and situations in the human condition in, futuristic settings, just to, I guess, kind of understand it a little bit better. And so that's what, that whole series is about. It's just about, these two women who are, messed over by the system and how they try to work and struggle to get free. And I've also done a paranormal mystery, which is, even though it's a paranormal mystery, it kind of explores, Southern traditions and the way Southerners behave. And you put, ghosts in a situation with living people, and how they try to coexist and live together. And then I started a new horror series last year, which pretty much delves more into my Gullah heritage. I didn't really identify as Gullah until I was in my 20s because I didn't know much about it. As you know, Gullah are from South Carolina or the Sea Islands, and most people kind of migrated up north to New York or D.C. or what have you, and kind of forgot about these things. And so, even though as the Everlasting is, it's set on this, it's a horror story. It's really trying to pull back to my, the roots that I didn't really know I had until I was a lot older. So.
Okay, and then, it's kind of equal parts, I was exposed to this, and equal parts, this is kind of what interests me, which I guess that's probably most of us. What about you, Ellen? Who and what were your influences that brought you to this, the speculative fiction genre?
Probably most of my influence were the movies I watched growing up. My family had to see every new movie, Independence Day, Terminator, RoboCop. That's what my parents generally like, those type of movies. So any type of actions, those sci-fi actions and all the Jason and Freddy movies. We went to the theater and saw all of those growing up. So that's my main influence with sci-fi. Through mostly movies, the books I read were the classics, Great Expectations and Treasure Island as a kid. So most of my sci-fi influences from what I saw on the screen. So when I write, I try to write it more in a movie style, kind of more visual.
Right.
Yeah, so you can kind of see and understand what I'm trying to display.
Mhm. And I mean, you didn't really read, like, you didn't have a big science fiction reading background?
No, because I mean, when I read like the science fiction that I've read like in school, I couldn't really relate to it until probably later in life. I kind of started finding people, and I was introduced to Octavia Butler in college. I didn't even, know that we had Black science fiction, to be honest. So science fiction was more like a movie thing for me because I felt like, I didn't know that there was any Black science fiction writers out there.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, finding out that we had that there were people like me who wrote science fiction kind of made me more interested in the subject. And I feel like a lot of African American people aren't interested in it because they don't see themselves in it. They can't relate to it. They can relate to Boys in the Hood on TV or maybe, a Scandal or something that they see other African Americans in. But if we don't see ourselves in sci-fi, such as, the sidekick or the guy that gets killed in the first 10 minutes of the movie, we don't, it's not appealing to a lot of African Americans. That's my opinion.
Well, no, it's true because, I mean, look at all the fuss everybody made about, what's his name, malt liquor guy playing Lando Calrissian in Star Wars. He was a dashing, swashbuckling type hero, and he was in, probably one of the most notable series out there. Not like Yaphet Kotto, who got eaten by a bug in Aliens right away. Most of the time, I think that we were seeing. I think most of the Black actors in sci-fi were wearing red jerseys, if I'm not mistaken. Or let's say. And died within the first 6 minutes at least of the TV show, and probably before the first climax in a movie. And
right.
So you're right about not seeing people like us in that. And of course the joke was and still is, well, that's the future, and they ain't planning on having us around.
Right. So we got to write ourselves in the future. We can't depend on other people because they're going to write the future that they want to see. So we have to write ourselves where, we want to see ourselves.
Well, that's true, and I'm not going anywhere. So somebody better have a book about a half Black, half Japanese lesbian living in a man's body, because I'd like to see science fiction that reflects my people. Anyway, Tanece, what about you? What kinds of things influenced you in this direction?
Well, growing up, my dad was really into, just everything. He was the one that got me into, comics and just things in general. But growing up, I was kind of the black sheep of my family because I was the first grandchild, but I was also probably the nerdiest grandchild my family had ever seen. So a lot of the stuff that put me onto science fiction and fantasy, I kind of just stumbled on my own. Being a night owl, I stayed up really late and started watching things like Gargoyles, and then I stumbled onto Static Shock, and then I found Milestone, and then all this other craziness happened, and then that's what just pushed me to this direction. It's just I kind of stumbled on things by myself and was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this existed. I need to find out more about it, and just digging into that and just researching and then watching everything or reading everything. I was like, that's what pushed me towards this. So I found all this stuff at a young age. So that's what pushed me to get into this, basically.
Mm-hmm. And it was exciting to you, right? Because it was the future, or a future, a different view of the future.
Yeah, a little bit, because even when I was younger, seeing, for example, I loved Static Shock, and I was like, there's a black person who's a superhero who I can totally relate to. I hope this becomes a thing that happens more. It kind of did, kind of didn't, but as a kid, that made me super excited because I'm like, I want to make my own superhero. I want my superhero to be on TV, that type of thing. Or I want my weird alien things to be on TV because I watched all these science fiction movies and fantasy movies because of my dad. So it just fed into me of, hey, I want to do that in the future, and that's what propelled me forward as a kid.
Yeah, and Kenyeda, you've got a science background. You approach a lot of stuff like a scientist, and there are a ton of scientists out there, as a matter of fact, who are into sci-fi, and some of them write. A lot of them write. There's a higher percentage of science guys who write science fiction than probably any other identifiable genre. Did that have an influence for you, or were you, did you read, did you watch the movies, was it TV shows? What was your influence that moved you into science fiction or speculative fiction?
For me, I always loved science, so yes, that was there. And of course, who doesn't love robots and everything else? I think the first real sci-fi series that I kept up with religiously was Animorphs, when Animorphs were a thing back in the 90s during the Scholastic period. And I really enjoyed those books and just the way K.A. Applegate discussed science and the different ways she contrived different races and how she handled their stories. Because, in a lot of ways, sometimes they were subversive. Like in the Animal series, there were these one race of aliens called hook badgers. And they had all these axes and, blades all over their bodies. And the bad guys used them as a sort of, killing machines, cutting down whatever. When, truth be told, when you actually discover the story of the hook badgers, they're vegetarians. The only reason they have, blades on their bodies is to cut bark off of trees, which they like to eat. And so that just kind of blew my mind that playing with these different perspectives could allow several different narratives to be told, but not necessarily the whole story. And then as I grew up, I stumbled onto, I like to write poetry and things, but then I stumbled on the fan fiction, which opened up a whole nother can of worms for me, and that's what finally pushed me into writing. And then so my science background and my love of questions and writing and stories, they all kind of came together in this one spot, because I can take all sorts of things and play with them for as little or as long as I want to. And I can do those same sorts of subversive narratives and perspectives and ideas. So that's pretty much what. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, that's what I was just going to say. That's kind of the type of things and thought process that sort of drove me towards doing speculative fiction and things like that. Mm-hmm. And of course, I got lucky. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. From what I've heard in discussion with you, is that when you ask the question, more often than not, the question is one of logic or science or, something along that line. Do you find it more gratifying to be able to write in the genre of kind of where you are today and to be able to kind of incorporate that in? And does that make it easier for you, or does it make it harder? Because you know as well as I do, most sci-fi writers don't know jack about science.
Exactly. In a lot of ways, it does make it easier. In a lot of ways, it does make it harder. I like being able to write about science and write about science in a creative way. I do enjoy doing that. Some people would be turned off by using science and physics because you have to, spend your time making sure that everything that you write in your story can pan out at least plausibly.
Right.
But I actually like working within those constraints because from the writer's perspective, it gives me a lot of places to play off of without necessarily having to create a whole bunch of unnecessary drama, that doesn't go anywhere, although having to, defer to one of those random sex scenes that really serves no point.
Right.
Because you can work, so like in my Nexus Nomads series, which I started, one of the things is that the spaceships that humans have devised, fly just below the speed of light. So it still takes years to get from one place to another. So sure, working out the physics might be a pain in the butt, but for my characters, it makes getting off of their planet that much more of a dire need, because it might be 350 years before another ship comes around. They'll be long dead by then. So it gives my characters a sense of urgency when you have to play off the science. So you don't necessarily have to incorporate or create drama. The drama can just exist just simply because the world exists and that's how it is.
Yeah, but one of the things that really bothers me about science fiction, whether it be books, comics, or movies, is the fact when something is so egregiously wrong, it pulls you out completely out of the story.
Yes,
you know?
I can agree with that too. Where you're just like, wait a minute, that is not even physically remotely possible. And it's even worse when you're a biologist because you go, there's no way that would work because your ribs will collapse way before that even happened.
Well, and I think the most egregious one that I find is right up your alley in biology. You know, every one of these sci-fi stories that deals with clones, they make clones that are fully grown. You can't make a clone that's fully grown. You can make a duplicate. And so, you know, when something like that...
Even then, it wouldn't even be useful. It would have the mind of an infant. The way the brain develops, it's the way the brain develops, it'd be impossible for it to just suddenly spread out a clone that can move and act and behave. I mean, sure, I guess you could teach it some things via muscle memory, but you literally have to walk it around like a dog on a leash because outside of an order, it can't think for itself.
Everybody, see what a scientist she is? See there? But you know, in certain ways, though, you know, using real science obviously enhances a story. A bunch of guys out at Batavia, where they have the accelerator, they have a science group out at Fermi Labs out there, and they read Discovery, so they invited me out, and there was like 12 people who had read Discovery, and I was there for a book meeting, and these are like hardcore science guys, and I will tell you that I lived in fear when I wrote that first book that I would get something wrong, and somebody would, you know, post it up on Amazon or a blog post or something going, this Hayashi guy doesn't know nothing, you know, or whatever. It's kind of like the Tom Clancy military nuts who go, oh, that gun doesn't even fire that bullet, you know, and they have such contempt because an error like that, a glaring error like that, pulls people out of the story. So that's one of the things that I always live in fear of, you know, that I'll do something screwy like that, or like say women have the Y chromosome and men have the X chromosome, and then somebody goes, what is wrong with this guy? You know, he's got a Japanese last name. You would think you'd be smarter than that, you know. And so that's the last thing I want to hear. So I mean, I know that you can over research because I think that's what I have a tendency to do. But on the other hand, getting it wrong can be very damaging. So I think So okay, now when you guys, you know, we talk about the influences. None of you really talked about authors very much, and you know we and I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's funny because every darn place I go when we talk about Afrofuturism, speculative fiction, if I'm on a panel, this, that, or the other thing, there are two names that always come up. What are the two names? You guys know both of them.
Octavia Butler is one of them. Octavia Butler, I know it's one. I can't think of the other one, though.
Yeah.
Samuel Delaney.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have any of you read either of them?
I'm reading Octavia right now. Yeah, I read
some of her short stories.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering because, you know, everybody throws those names at people like us, people like you, people like me. They go, well, you know, Octavia Butler this, Octavia Butler that, and, Samuel Delaney. Samuel Delaney doesn't even talk about his books anymore. All he talks about is being gay in Paris. I swear to you, I went to the University of Chicago, and he actually announced before, I mean, there was like 200 people there, and he announced announced right at the beginning, he says, I hope none of you are here to hear me talk about my books, because I'm really tired of talking about my books. But I would like to tell you about my experiences growing up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know.
That's kind of
I'm sorry?
Yeah. For me, unfortunately, for me growing up, I really didn't. It really took me a long time, like till I got to college, before I really got steeped in exactly how many African Americans were in all of the stuff that I liked, because all that I saw growing up was white. So you got
Right.
your Isaac Asimovs and, those stories. But that's really all I saw. The first time I ever heard Octavia Butler's name was I read it off of a poster for a symposium Spelman was having as an undergrad.
What is
that? I'm
what
sorry,
is
I had
that,
to kill
a goat?
I had to sacrifice a goat because we kept mentioning Octavia Butler's name. So, yes, it's busy in my house.
Yes, Steve.
No, that was just a bad fan. I did not kill a goat. I don't want anybody reporting me to the ASPCA. As a matter of fact, I started my own chapter in my neighborhood of PETA, which stands for people eating tasty animals, and we're doing quite well.
Oh yeah.
All right. So, but to your point about supposedly the golden age of science fiction, the golden age of science fiction was nothing but white authors.
Right.
So,
right.
For me, Asimov, Herbert, Clark, all of them, I read all of that. And I'm not trying to brag, but I read everything that came out of the Golden Age, Heinlein, everybody, and that's what I grew up on. And then one of the coolest things I saw, I thought, like Johnny Quest was a big cartoon for me, and that was basically a sci-fi cartoon, and it actually had somebody who wasn't white, which was kind of remarkable. It was very forward thinking for the that was the 60s. So those were the kinds of things that were my influences. And then when you look at comic books, there weren't nearly as many independents as there were. Obviously, it was a Marvel and DC world. And I didn't even consider comic books really sci-fi because for me, science fiction came out of books. My dad had hundreds of books, and so those were my influences. And I wonder, I know that I write, I think what's called hard science fiction because it actually has the science in it. But I also want, I'm like you guys, I want my characters to drive the story. So I think that the reason why I choose both, or I'm able to encompass both, or both are influences, is because I came to writing so late. I only started writing in 2001, so it wasn't so much, my dad likes science fiction. These are the golden years guys, the golden age of science fiction guys. I want to write just like them. I think it was more about, my writing probably is more grounded in social justice, which is just almost like an offshoot about you guys when you talk about community and when you talk about, the way people solve problems. Mine is basically, anger and rage. And that brings me to the question of, you guys are women, from what I can tell. And this is not, it's still not a women-friendly society that we're in. There are all kinds of things going on. I mean, you look at the big political issues, equal pay, stuff like that. You look at, all these old-ass white men who are busy trying to control your uterus. And these same busy-ass white men who are trying to control your uterus are also trying to decriminalize rape. So what kind of sick stuff is that? But it's still kind of a hostile or not as friendly venue, this culture for women. And when you write, is part of that, that lack in our culture, a part of what you write about? Are you driven by those kinds of issues in the stories that you put together?
No, I'm driven by trying to make characters that I can relate to. Like I said earlier, watching sci-fi and not being able to see someone like me in it. That's what drives me. That's what made me want to become a writer. Because I used to be an avid reader. Like as a little child, I used to read like tons of books per month and win a Scholastic thing every month in my class. And I just could. I never saw people like me. I mean, I never read about people like me in the books, and that's what made me want to write, like create my own worlds, create worlds of people that I've interacted with, people that I know, so that they could see themselves and create a new reality for themselves. Like we were talking earlier, they have a future without us in it. We need to create a future with us in it.
And so the issues of today are not so prevalent or don't drive the stories that you create so much, right?
No, not for me.
Yeah. What about the rest of you guys?
For me. Wait, did I cut somebody else?
No, you go, Kenyeda. I'll go next.
Okay. For me, it's kind of a bit of both. I definitely want to see people like me and who I am represented, as well as sometimes I just like to. I use writing as sort of a way to help me sort of work out how I feel about certain things, or to play with certain ideas that I don't necessarily have experience of myself. So the characters that I create, they're sort of the variables that I'm, running these questions through to try and figure out, what does this look like, and what could things look like, and what can we do with relationships, what constitutes a relationship, how and why. And so I look at it more from the social perspective. So yes, I do think about things like, the unjustified killing by police officers and social justice issues and things like that, and poverty. But I try to sort of put myself in other people's shoes through my characters, and sort of treat them as people and seeing what kind of worlds and situations kind of unfold from those things.
And Tanece?
Yeah, mine's a little bit of both. Sometimes I like to make commentary about what's happening, but a lot of times I try to stay focused on what's really important to me in that moment. And really, I grew up seeing a lot of negativity on TV, especially for Black women, where we can't come together as a positive thing for some reason. And I'm not saying that about everybody, but a lot of time in Black media, Black women don't get along or whatever for whatever reason, or we're always taught to, be at each other's throats when that's not the case. So a lot of the times when I'm writing and I'm dealing with my characters, I'm focusing on more of what's the social aspects of, hey, we can work together, or hey, this is how things should, not how things should be, but there's another take on how you can view something like this. And that's what I tend to focus on, like community and things of that nature. Sometimes I might drift into things of what's happening in our world right now, but other than that, I try and focus on people being people and just, humanity, I suppose. That's not to sound big and fancy, but that's kind of what I want to focus on a lot of the time. Just people trying to be more empathetic and understanding people. So that's what I try to focus on a lot of the times, and that's what kind of feeds into my writing.
Yeah. And Rasheedah, what about you? I mean, are there bigger issues that you integrate into your writing, or are your stories more just basically character-driven? What kind of issues do you surround your stories with, or embed in your stories? I guess that's a better way to put it.
I think I definitely am aware of the struggles of being female and Black in America. I don't necessarily put that in the book, I'm a Black female, and it's hard for me, But I think I try to maybe put a lot of the struggle surreptitiously in there, especially since it's, if I'm dealing with, ghosts and people, you can, I guess, substitute it for, minorities and majorities, or from, that kind of thing. I think, to me, it's very important when I'm writing a character that the character is relatable and it's a person. I think one of the hardest things to do when you're going from college to the corporate world or the real world is to realize that when people look at you, they're not seeing a person. Not all people, but a good majority of people will, they don't see, an individual who has thoughts and feelings. you know, if they don't see that. And, I mean, you know, you can see over and over and over again in YouTube people doing these social experiments. You know, a black person asks for money from the stranger, and then a white person asks for money from the stranger, which is, you know, very, very simplistic, you know, examples. But, yeah, these things do happen. And I think, you know, you can see it more so in my early work, you know, the struggle and the frustration of it. Becoming aware of it was hard because, you know, I'd always see myself as being like, oh, I'm very smart, you know, I'm just going to get out there and people are going to just love me, you know, because I'm so brilliant. But
well, if you lived here in Chicago, you know, as an author, and if you were black up until a few years ago, you were going to write your book, you were going to hand it to Oprah, and then Oprah was going to open up your life for you.
Exactly. That's
I
the
swear
dream,
to you,
right?
every black author in Chicago that I talked to said the same thing. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get my book to Oprah, and she's going to put it in her book club, and then I'm on Easy Street. And,
it just doesn't work.
You know, expectations, yeah. Hang on a second, ladies. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the Black Science Fiction Society website. Log in, get your friends, come in. There's a lot of good content there for those of you who are just picking this up as a podcast or have not checked out the site. We're having a panel discussion for July 10th, 2015, and the special guests tonight are Ellen Gibson, Rasheedah Prioleau, Tanece Brooks, and Kenyeda Adams. And I feel awfully privileged to be at least talking to all of you all at one time because you know, there's a certain idea that I have about black speculative fiction. Okay, Afrofuturism, I guess, is the word of the the moment. We were speaking with Yatasha Womack last week about Afrofuturism. But as far as a genre, it appears that it's picking up a little more recognition in mainstream America. And to be honest, the ideas coming out of the black speculative fiction movement, the Afrofuturism movement, are creative ideas that have not been seen in mainstream culture. So when we think of in terms of writing our stories, do any of you think in terms of the commercial viability of what you're writing? Is it something that's going to sell? How do you guys look at, you know, where your financial potential might be as a black creative? And Ellen, let's start with you.
Yeah, it comes to mind, but I don't want it to control my whole creative process.
Right.
So you kind of focus on it after at the end result of what you're trying to put together. If you want to write something that the fans and the readers are going to enjoy to read,
right.
It's not going to be boring and dull, but then you also don't want to turn over your project to trying to please the masses and trying to make sales and things like that. Because if you're writing something good and interesting, people will want to see what it is. They will want to, like if it's a movie or a novel, people will want to read it, and word of mouth helps with that. It's not really a process of kind of crafting, like you said, adding sex scenes to stories and things just for, I guess, a shock factor. My process doesn't go that way.
And what about you, Kenyeda?
Yes, I'm pretty much on the same boat as Ellen. I'm not necessarily looking to, be able to finance my life, off of writing. If it comes to that, great. But yeah, I'm looking to just write a good story and a story that I'm proud of. And, the characters that I put out there, I'm sure that, people who may not have seen them, and I guess one of my big things is making sure that people who
Uh-oh, sounds like somebody's phone.
Uh-oh.
Either that or we've been attacked and the nuclear war is starting, and Indianapolis just got it first, which means Chicago's right around the corner. Anyway, until she comes back, Tanece, what about you? When you are doing your creative, and you both write and you're an artist, are you thinking in terms of, compensation, the economics of it, or are you really interested in generating good stories or what have you, and seeing what the market looks at afterwards?
I'm definitely the latter. Very rarely do I think about how much like the money aspect wise of it, because to me I'm a creative because I just do it because I love doing it. So if someone happens to like my writing when I post it up, that's awesome, that's great. If they don't, I just focus more of, hey, I'm having fun doing this. If someone else likes it, that's really awesome. So maybe after I'm done I'll think about it, but never like really beforehand do I like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try and capitalize on this or anything like that. That has rarely ever crossed my mind when I create anything. So.
Wow. Well, I don't mean to sound like that. I didn't mean it like that, like the way it sounded. It's just because at its essence, being a creative is kind of like the essence of being an entrepreneur. Because then you have you have what you're creating. You would like, I think all of us would love to have lots of people enjoy our work. And the extension of that is if lots of people enjoy our work, we will get compensated for that. And somebody says some people create for the intrinsic value. Yeah, then they ought to be writing like a diary. That's what that is. When people create for intrinsic value and don't give a damn about the market, they're writing a diary. You heard it from me. Somebody had to say it. I'll say it. But it is a difficult thing because you can't really be sitting there going, oh, well, this word will pay me so much, and oh, if I use this word, people will love the book more or love the story more or whatever. I mean, obviously you want, you're trying to create good art, whether it's writing, whether it's art, drawing, comic book, what have you. But I mean, at the end of the day, and I hate using that, oh my God, I just said that phrase. When you get down to it, I think we all create for other people. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I can mostly agree with that. I'm back.
Yeah, I can agree with that, yeah.
And if other people like what we do, then there's benefit to it. There's we will make money, or we will achieve fame, or we will write 750,000 words of a trilogy and not make $10,000 yet, and then write a business plan and get paid $100,000 for that. So, yeah, that's just my issue.
I think at the end of the day, as a creative, the money is fine. You're always going to, I mean, obviously, people on this phone are not, like, going to struggle if they don't sell 1 million copies of their book.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think when you're writing to influence and you're writing to make a difference. So, money's great, yeah, fame is fabulous, but I think when I'm writing because I enjoy doing it. I think it's something that's in you. It helps you live, makes you feel better to do it. But it's also, I think, when you get it out there to the people and they respond to it, that's also, a reward in and of itself. I think, I love it when people are like, well, what did you mean when you did this, and what about that, and how did you come up with it? Those things, the back and forth, and that people are actually ingesting what you put out. I think that's the thrill. The money, maybe it'll come, maybe it won't, but being able to do it, I think is enough.
Well, I mean, if we look at art traditionally and storytelling traditionally, remember, not too long ago, storytellers were really at the top of the economic food chain because, storytellers would travel and go from place to place to place, and they would tell their stories, and they would be fed, they would be housed, and they would hear other stories, and so they would circulate culture. This is just a kind of a trivia thing, but back in Roman times, well, do you know where the term news came from, you guys?
No,
Nope.
I do not.
No.
Okay, well, here's the custom. Back in Roman times, when you met another traveler, maybe crossing a road, going in a different direction than you, there was an obligation for you to tell that traveler a little bit about where you came from, what was going on, and things like that, so that news would be circulated further and wider, because obviously they didn't have the kinds of means of doing that today. And the word news actually came from the directions on a compass: north, east, west, and south. And if you were going one way and someone was going another way, north or whatever, you would be obligated to tell them about where you came from, about your village, what you had heard. And so that's the etymology of the word news, and it came from the cardinal or ordinal points of the compass. And so we are we're in the same vein as storytellers, and that is, that's huge, because what we're doing is we're giving people ideas and stories that they never would have gotten otherwise. And so there should be value to that, and usually there is value to that. If you tell good stories, they get passed on. And yeah, I would love to see maybe my books in every high school in America, because it talks about issues that have to do with whatever, or it's a good story or what have you. But in the back of my mind, and not so far back, I would still like to be very successful with my writing for no other reason than if it could free me from getting viruses off of stupid people's computers, and I could just sit there and write and be able to sustain myself with my writing. That to me is like the pinnacle of the creativity and what it can mean to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree.
Because I think all of us have pretty much day jobs or, day job kind of things, rather than, are any of the four of you lucky enough to just live off your writing yet?
I wish.
No, not yet.
Exactly. But and neither can I. But wouldn't that be ideal? Like, Tanece, wouldn't you love to just be able to write and draw?
All day long.
All day
long.
And,
yes, I would love that.
And then to be able to do that, and not have to worry about, oh man, I got to go do this stupid thing so that I can pay my bills. So there, I think that even as storytellers, not so buried back in the back. Yeah, we want to tell good stories. Yeah, we want to craft good stories. Yeah, we want to have great characters. Yeah, we want to, all of these really highfalutin, like college-like things or whatever. And yet, the ideal would be to have other people recognize our work in sufficient manner that our work could pay for us to do more of our work.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So does that revolve in your consciousness, in any of, for the four of you? I'm guessing all of you would love to be able to create and make enough money from your creation so that you could just create more, correct?
Right.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
definitely.
the end goal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. But still, it's work. You can write this thing, and that's the joy of it. The joy of it is writing.
Right.
But if you really want to make money off of it, Tom Joyner calls himself the hardest working man in radio for a reason. It's a lot of work to, write a book, market the book, go on tour with the book, get on these, shows to promote the book. That's still doing something other than writing.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's like, 6 eggs in one bag, half a dozen in the other. I could have a paycheck job, quote unquote, and write in my spare time and, put it out there. Or, I can really put my, my engine behind my writing and do those other things. Because to me, it's still the same thing. I got to get out of my bed. I got to, do the makeup and hair, get the clothes. All of those things that go along with having a job is still, if you want your writing to be your breadwinner, it's a job too.
Yeah, but, excuse me for putting it this way, but this is exactly how it is for me. When I'm sitting here writing, when I'm sitting here working on a book, I don't even have to have pants on. And you talk about your hair. I don't have to worry about if I'm having a good hair day or a bad hair day. I mean, it's kind of like the ultimate freedom, until you have to get to the business of doing business. Exactly. And then, if you have a publicist, they're going to send you out and they have to be on TV, or, you have to, like me, I have to, I don't know, whatever I have to do to look good on TV. I think basically they can't Photoshop my ass on TV, which is really, really what's been keeping me off of there. But you're right. Yes, there's the business aspect of being a creative, but then the creative part. I mean, at some point, we don't see Stephen King doing, infomercials late at night. He doesn't have to do any commercials anymore, and if you get to that point, I think, to me, that would be the most liberating part of being a creative, where I could create, the checks come in, and I could go out or not if I chose, or I could stay home and create. So, that's just what I'm shooting for. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think Stephen King paid his dues. Stephen King didn't wake up Stephen King. Stephen King had everything that I'm talking about. He had to bust his hump. Him, Charlene Harris, Anne Rice. Somebody the other day I saw a post. She first saw interview of a vampire in the $1 bin before it was like a movie. So. Yeah, at some point, you do want to, and that's with any career, you do want to get to the point where you can, quote, unquote, retire. But until then, you're going to be working. It ain't going to be, I'm just going to write this thing and it's going to sell like hotcakes. For a while, it's going to be work, real work.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that is the hardest part, is being able to raise your visibility high enough so that you can get the attention that at least gets the people to know who you are.
Right.
So let's talk about the gender difference in the business of doing business. Have any of you run into the situation where you may have been dealing with someone in your business creative part of you where you thought that you were getting treated differently than maybe I would be, being a man and being, a writer?
I wouldn't say that I've actually encountered anything explicit, but it does kind of annoy me when, I say, oh, yeah, I'm going to write a book, and, the first response I get is, oh, is it a romance? No, it's not.
Oh, God, yeah, that's so annoying.
No, it's not. But yeah, that's the extent of it as I have, encountered it. But I don't see anything particularly special about me being an author. It's just more surprise, like, oh, you're doing that? That's nice. You either get sort of the patronizing sort of, oh, that's nice, like you're a 5-year-old and like, hey, look at your sister. Or
right,
you get
exactly.
or you get the, oh, so you're writing a romance. No. Or, oh, you're going to write the next Twilight, right? Oh, God, no.
Oh, God, no, not that.
Or something to that effect, it's not taken seriously. But, that's just sort of like, I think that's just, people in general. Like, it's not just in that respect that I get that sort of response. When people discover I study biology, or that, I have my own, form of spirituality, science aside. Yes, I'm a scientist. Yes, I have my own beliefs, but I keep those to myself. And yes, I'm writing a book, and you don't have to take me seriously. Or, you can just go on about your way. It doesn't matter to me. But I do make sure that, whatever I put forward is my best foot forward because, you don't want to give nobody no excuse.
Well, the other thing is, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And you're right. There is a gender expectation out there for women doing certain things. Obviously that, assuming that you're doing a romance novel or something like that, then you tell them, well, I'm doing a horror book or I'm doing sci-fi, and then people look at you and I've actually watched other women authors say that. I've been watching, they'll say something, and then I'll watch the eyes of the person they're talking to kind of glaze over as they try to wrap their heads around something that was completely different. And you want to say to them, well, who the hell do you think wrote all those damn books? They weren't all written by men. All the sci-fi books weren't written by men. And there's a whole bunch of men out there lying their asses off using women's names writing romance novels.
Yeah, they are. And it wasn't.
They have a completely different flavor. You could always pick the males out.
Yeah, it isn't like one of the first sci-fi writers, Mary Shelley, wasn't she? The one that wrote Frankenstein. I mean,
yes, she did.
There's an image of sci-fi writers being like the guy that looks like Stephen King hunched over a computer, and I think people got that in their head, like there can't be any other type of writer, like a little nerdy guy, and they really count out females of all different types of ethnicities out of the picture.
I was thinking about kind of like a female sci-fi writer. I think it was, I don't know if it was Anne McCaffrey, maybe it was. I think she was like in a couple pictures in the back of her book with her smoking a pipe. Mm-hmm. And so people went, oh, she's a crazy sci-fi writer. Maybe she wants to be a guy or something like that. And people are stupid. I'll give my quick explanation, but that bell-shaped curve of IQ distribution, top dead center is 100, and that's average, which means that half of that curve, half of the people out there are of subnormal IQ. And so, when you have to deal with people like that, it's got to get tedious. I never have anybody question that I'm a writer or why I'm a writer or that I write speculative fiction or that I write sci-fi. I have never, ever, ever had any measure of disbelief. Nobody patted me on the head and said, oh, that's really good, son. That's cute. That's, like they would a woman. So there's still perceptions out there that are hard to overcome, or at least, the boundaries are now kind of broadening. You have, I would say, right now, almost as many women writing in the Afrofuturism genre as there are men, and that's kind of unusual. When you take black people, and you can see that kind of dichotomy there, and there are you have so many women authors and men authors, kind of making this movement. When you guys think about like where you might be, if your writing catches on, are we looking at the same kinds of things that we talked about a few minutes ago about having the freedom to create more? If it gives you that that kind of freedom, that kind of financial freedom, do you think your creativity will take a hit? Do you think it'll increase? I mean, what happens when you're freed of having to pay the bills? How does that affect how you go about creating? Any of you?
Well, I think making a career out of writing is the end goal for most writers, and being able to support yourself from your artwork. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it would. I think you would have more time to think and create. You'll have more. You'll be able to travel more, experience more things, and might open up your creativity a little bit better than having to worry about paying bills and this and that, and having, like Rasheedah was speaking about, getting dressed and working and all this stuff. It gives your brain more time to explore different, ideas.
Mhm. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's just if I really get to the point where I want to be, books, TV, film, of course, to me it's just about allowing others to do the same thing, giving more people access, giving jobs to people that wouldn't have a job otherwise. That's really because I've lived the life that I've always wanted to live. And so right now it's just about trying to build something for the future, trying to build something, have something for my son and for others as well. Because, in today, there really is no vehicle. There's no, everybody seems to have to start from bootstraps up. And so I definitely want to be a part of, creating a vehicle or a way for, young, young ladies to, okay, this is where you enter, and, this is how you get your career to, go the way you want it to go. Whereas, right now everybody's kind of wild, wild west, huh? And, you kind of have to, you really have to struggle through it pretty much on your own for the most part. But hopefully, if I get to where I really want to be, I'll be, just another vehicle, like, say, for example, Shonda Rhimes or, Tyler Perry. They give jobs to people who wouldn't have jobs otherwise.
Right. And so you see it kind of almost like for you it's maybe a social movement, or that would be the result. Yeah. Let me ask you guys this. We got about a half an hour to go, but I'll start with you, Kenyeda. How did you find BSFS?
Well, I accidentally stumbled onto a writer's group chat that happens every now and then on BSFS, that's hosted by TC, Thanking Caveman on BSFS. I just happened to stumble into it one day because I found it on Twitter. And from there, I met William and TC and several other people who happened to be hanging out that day. And they led me to the website, and that's how I got here.
And I'm going to ask all of you this because it's kind of a unique community. But what does it mean to you being a member here?
I think it's really, really cool because it's really nice to have other African American folks actually, go, hey, I do that too, and not having to get these blank looks like, what is that? And why would you be interested? Or, if I have a writing issue or a writing problem, I can go to somebody who's been at it longer than me and go, hey, this is what I'm having an issue with. Or, hey, I've got this idea and does it sound completely ridiculous? Or does this sound like a good idea to go with? So it's nice to have a group of people that I can go to with ideas and complaints or even just topics and not have to spend half of my time explaining why this is a thing. It's just, I can put it out there and they go, oh, yeah, I got you. Or even better, I know about that thing. Let me get you this. Or go check out this or go look at this or try this.
And what about you, Tanece?
I think I was actually Googling like Black science fiction or something to that degree because I was looking up something and they were talking about Milestone and they were talking about something else and then they kind of dropped a link for, BSFS, and I was like, whoa, what is this? I've never seen this before, and I clicked it, and I immediately had to sign up like that day because it was so like interesting, and it was the first time I've ever seen anything like that. So I just found it by straight up Googling, and by accident I just kind of stumbled upon it, and I've been around ever since. So.
Mm-hmm. And so what's it been for you? What's it been like being a member of this community?
It's been really inspiring, actually. I've seen so many cool things and so many people who are like, oh, yeah, I'm writing this thing or I'm drawing this thing and let me post my artwork and let me post up my little thing in progress. I've been able to talk to some really creative people about their different projects and everything, and it's really inspiring to get me to, like, work on my own thing and try and collaborate with other people as well. So it's just been all around kind of a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And Rasheedah, how did you find it?
Yeah, I joined Black Science Fiction Society quite a while ago, and I didn't come back to it until I published American Spectre, and Jarvis asked me to do a radio interview with you, and I did. At that time, I didn't even know there was a radio show, and so when I did the interview, and then I saw all the wonderful people in Black Science Fiction Society. That's kind of when I became more involved with what was going on.
And I'm sorry, how did you find it, though? Do you remember how you stumbled upon the site?
I think I probably just Googled it at some point, Black Science Fiction, and found it that way. Because it was like 2007, 6, a long time ago.
Wow.
And then I think I sent in a request to have my book reviewed by the site, and that's when Jarvis asked me if I would do an interview.
And Ellen, what about you? How did you find the site?
I was on a book site searching for Black science fiction books, and I came across this awesome author named William Hayashi.
Wait, you found me?
I told you the story. Yes, of course. And then I went to your website from there. And you had some links to CSFS to, I guess, get some samples of reading the book. And that's how I found you guys from Searching for Discovery.
And what I don't want to talk about me because that's a whole another show. But I mean, what was being here like for you?
Well, it kind of opened up a new world to me because before I only knew Octavia Butler.
Yeah, and the community. I mean, first of all, you ladies talk to each other all the time. You're in chat. You go to hangouts together. You guys hang together a lot. How important is it? I mean, the fact that you have a number of female contemporaries to hang out with online.
Oh yeah, always fun. Always fun. It's really nice to have other females to talk about it with. Nothing wrong with hanging out and having fun, enjoying music or anything. But it's just nice sometimes to come in and walk into BSFS and have a conversation going and everybody's in on it. And, having female voices there in some of the discussions we have. Because everybody walks in with a different perspective, there's always something new to take away from a conversation. So I always enjoy that.
And do you guys feel diminished at all because of your gender? Or is it a very egalitarian, very welcoming kind of place in what traditionally for like 5 decades was a male-dominated collective?
Right, but I think within our community, it's not really gender-based. I mean, we're all writers of color coming together, trying to help each other, uplift each other, and meet the goal of exposing the rest of the world to Black science fiction.
I'm sorry, I was still blown away that somebody found me and then found the site because of me. Okay, so let's talk about empowering women because there's all kinds of issues. Not so much of them for writers. I don't think that women writers make 73 cents for every dollar a male writer makes. But do you guys see any hurdles based upon your gender? In this creative endeavor?
I could see getting a publisher might be an issue depending on how you decide to sign your books. Because, again, that whole women belong in romance thing has cropped up again. Because I don't know if, because for some publishers, they're very much on the numbers. And so even if, it takes years for them to kind of catch up to that, so they're kind of immediately going, if they see a woman's name on it and it's not in the romance section, they may be leery about giving it a chance on the shelf. So if you want to go as far as the publishing route or a traditional publishing route, then you might have a much harder time getting into the business, especially outside of the genres that women are usually relegated to. In terms of having a reader's audience, I mean, that's just something that I think every author has to kind of put up with. But I think the only other thing that we might have to come across are the weird stalkers that, come up with all the fun, witty stuff to say to you and then wonder why you were giving them a side eye.
So you're saying that even places where black science fiction writers hang out, you still have the vast...
Oh, yes, you do.
Well, don't name any names, okay? Because, this will be a podcast up for a long time. But
yeah, I know.
Well,
I'm well aware.
What about the rest of you? I mean, do you see the more of a gender equality, at least in this in this community, in this social network? Did I ask the whole question or not?
I think it's a very hard question to answer.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Never mind. Hey, some people actually. There's a question here. Well, let's see. JC asked Holbrook, who is normally in South Africa, but she's in Colorado. I hope she's enjoying some of that legal weed there, if that's something she likes, because apparently. But she asked, where do you get your science from for their fiction? And Kenyeda, you're a biologist. You mentioned that you do your own research. What about the other three of you? That's a pretty good question. I mean, do you research science for your writing? Tanece?
Oh, yeah, definitely if it calls for it. I definitely start looking up things. If I'm trying to be absolutely correct, I do a lot of research, and I read lots of books that also pertain to it. So if I do happen to be writing science fiction or even fantasy, I even do some research for it. That's always how I start things off, basically. So I do lots of, just reading up on things, just to make sure that, hey, I'm making sure I'm getting this right so you guys don't come out like, hey, you're wrong about that. So I don't want to do that. So I definitely do some research and just, look into it.
Yeah, and Rasheedah, you're kind of in the horror genre. So for you, I would guess that consistency matters. But I mean, what kind of research do you do? Is yours for the kinds of things you write?
I will research, say if there's any type of physical things that are going on. Say if somebody right now I have to research it, how do people recover from hypothermia? So those types of things, I'll try to do that type of research. But really, I'm one of those science fiction writers that aren't very light on the science part of things.
Okay.
Side of things.
Yeah.
It's more fantasy, paranormal, and horror magic kind of stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Ellen?
The same as Rasheedah. Mine's just mostly not a scientific base, more paranormal, I guess futuristic, space opera type of things.
Right.
So with the research with that, I guess I'll kind of look at, some different stories, ghost stories and things, and research.
Right.
More like a historical type of researching on the area and certain things like that.
Okay. Somebody here asked, when I'm doing scientific research, where do I research? And if I do want to talk to a scientist, how do you go about finding someone? I'll tell you a quick story. In my first book, I do something with a space shuttle, which is unusual. And when I was doing my research, I first looked at Wikipedia, I looked at NASA, I looked at places like that. And then finally, I called down to NASA and said I needed some information, and they connected me to the head research librarian in Houston. And she was a very nice lady, and I don't remember her name right now. And I said, hey, I have an idea that I'm putting in my book. This is my idea. And she listened to it, and apparently was writing it down, and she was really excited. And she said, okay, I'll call you back tomorrow or the next day. And I said, really? Or, do you have a library down there? She said, no, I'm going to ask the engineers. Which, that was so cool, and she called me back and she said, man, they were kind of excited because they had thought of it, but they'd never thought of it, but the fact that you're putting in a book was really cool. So, yes, this could happen. So, and then if I want to talk to a scientist, there's a bunch of them at Fermi in Batavia. And since some of them have read the book, I've got a couple names. So I can call somebody out there and go, okay, I need someone who can give me the best information on string theory. So sometimes just picking up the phone is, if you can't find it online or you don't understand it online, sometimes just picking up the phone and calling someplace like that. Universities are good for that if you can catch the right person.
Yeah.
Hey. So and professors are patient because they normally are teachers, and usually they can give you some information. So because I am a hard science guy in my science and military, same thing for military. Although I did make up something military in Discovery and got visited by 2 Secret Service guys because they thought that somebody had told me something I shouldn't have known. So some stuff I guess. But if I guess it, it's got to be plausible. I don't want to go, oh, and then he put on his James Bond jetpack and he went from New York to London. Something ridiculous like that. So let's see what else. Things are scrolling past here quick. Oh, one of the guys there wanted to know. One of the guys there wanted to know, how hard is it for the 4 of you to write male characters?
Yeah. William.
Yes.
Oh, I was gonna say to the other question. Sometimes, just hitting universities and hitting the departmental website. Hello.
Right.
Okay. Sometimes hitting the departmental websites are good. Just hitting the biology or chemistry or physics websites for colleges are really good because you can get people's names, and 9 out of 10, you can actually get the numbers for the labs and for the PIs of those labs who that's what they spend their lives doing. And I can tell you from personal experience, scientists love talking about their science. You ask them a question they can answer, they will talk to you all day. So, like William said, picking up the phone or sending an email, we're pretty approachable folks. I mean, I hang out on Twitter like, hey, I'll answer any question. It might take me a minute to find it, but I'll answer it. So you can always do that. In the chat, Google Scholar. Google Scholar is a good one. If you can't find it, you can either, I'll leave my information. I can find it for you because usually schools have access to the papers and things. So if there's things you want and can't get, I'm almost sure you can probably get someone to send it to you. And as writing male characters, I'm a little intimidated sometimes by writing male characters because I definitely don't want to write them wrong. But usually I start with just treating them as human and hoping for the best.
What about you, Tanece? How do you write your male characters?
I agree. I just kind of hope for the best because I try and play it up and not do a lot of stereotypes and everything. So a lot of my male characters might not be what a stereotypical male might be or how they're supposed to act. But I'm like, if you don't like it, oh well. But at the same time, I don't really have trouble with them. But I wish I wrote with them more. So it's iffy. It's iffy. I'll say that.
Rasheedah?
Yeah, I try to limit the amount of time I spend writing male characters for the same reason. I just, because I'm as old as I am, I still don't quite understand men, and so what I'll do is I'll try to convey the character through their actions, without deep delving into how they feel about it, what they think about it. This is just what they're doing, and this is how it relates to the main character. So maybe I'm treating them a little bit like women are being treated in most male novels, but that's the only way I can really do it and be authentic because to this day I still have trouble trying to understand what motivates the male species.
We're very basic people. We're pretty direct too. Ellen, what about you?
No, I don't really have a difficulty with male characters. I just like to have male feedback on if I'm doing them right.
Same here.
Right, yeah. I mean, I enjoy writing male characters. I enjoy, exploring a different side of, myself psychologically, trying to figure the character out. But I don't think I'm too far off in getting male characters down. But and you still have that, kind of, like, I think it was Kenyeda was saying, you kind of want to see if you're doing it right. You don't want to embarrass yourself too much, and then people it throws them out of the story.
Yeah. There is a line that I find pretty useful that might work for you guys. I mean, I don't need it myself because I am male mostly. But the line goes, if you don't understand men, then you're trying too hard.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think
wait, are you saying men are basic, William?
Yeah, I don't think men are basic. I think men are complicated. I think that's
really.
I think men trying to be basic is what makes them complicated. Men don't tell you how they feel. They'll do something, and you got to try to wrap your head around why they did it. And that's just been my experience. So that's why I will give them an action, but I don't try to explain it ever. I try to just make this is what they're doing, and it helps her or it doesn't help her, and that's it.
Mhm. Yeah. So rather than creating a three-dimensional character, your character's reactions to your primary character, who is a female, is how you convey the personality.
Yeah, and I still think they're three-dimensional. It's just that I'm not trying to make them women. I think I can write a woman, and this is what she's thinking, this is how she's feeling, this is why she's doing it, and it makes sense because I'm a woman.
Right.
But if I try to do that for a man, it's going to be, no, men don't think that way. Men aren't like that. But yeah, men will do that. But don't try to explain why. That's where you get in trouble.
Well, there are some men. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry?
That's why I said I pretty much go for treat them as human, and then we'll talk. Because usually, I always kind of get annoyed because everywhere you go, the definition of what a male behavior is changes. Because, you go over to Europe and men kiss each other all the time. In America, people start asking you questions. But, that's just what it is. So, for me, it's treat them as human. So, every man isn't a man's man. Every woman isn't a woman's woman. So just treat the character as a character of themselves, and then, let them be what they are.
Wow. Well, since let's see. Have you guys read, like sci-fi, spec fiction, whatever, written by men who get women right?
Stephen King.
Besides me.
Besides William? No, not really.
Yeah.
No. Not that I can think of off the top of my head, no.
I think I have one because I didn't really have a problem with it.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
there's been so much money made from, supposedly men are from Mars, women are from Venus, people accentuating the differences like there's some mysticism about it. But I think Rasheedah's right where when you talk about how people are relating with each other, you don't necessarily have to worry about putting in gender specifics or, as they say, hanging a lantern on them, to highlight them. If you talk about how people relate together, it would seem to be, because we all have experiences. We all have experiences where we've dealt with the opposite sex, we've dealt with the same sex, where we've dealt with the other new things that have just been codified by the Supreme Court. So I would imagine that, at least for me, looking at the people around me made it much, much easier for me to write characters who were not my gender. And I think writers have a tendency to pay more attention to the people around them because they do seek out inspiration. When you guys create characters, do you integrate people you know into your character constructs?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep. All the time.
Yeah. All the time. Yeah, those little quirks and habits just pop up, and you're like, oh yeah, that's so and so. Oh well, it works. It works. But yeah, I kind of not to rely on that too much because I definitely don't want a character to just be a person I know. But yes, you will see little habits, and as much as I try to avoid it, I see some of my own habits come out from time to time, depending on the type of character that I'm writing. But I see a little bit of my sister in some of my more headstrong characters. I see some of my mom, some of my mom and those characters that like to fret all the time, or that are worrisome, or I mean. I see, when I see humor, I see my brother, so it's the little things that come out about the people that you know because you have a feeling for that and for yourself, but I just try not to make a habit.
Well, I mean, that not to interrupt, but that begs the question, the conventional wisdom and even writing classes will teach you that if you're an author and you write a short story or you write a novel, that all the characters are parts of you because it's very difficult for most people to get out of their own heads to try to figure out, a three-dimensional construct of another personality. Do you guys think it's that hard? I don't think it's that hard because we have so many examples around us. These examples, they must obviously help, right?
Yeah, but as a creator, each of your character does carry a little part of you in them. Doesn't mean they have to be exactly like you, but they have
that's true.
As a human, they have some of your similar elements to them.
Mhm. Well, let's see. We got a few minutes to go, about 7-8 minutes to go. If anybody has any questions in the chat room, go ahead, type them in. But let's start with you, Ellen. Is there anything that what's the most significant thing that you've learned being a creative? About your art, about your craft. What do you think makes you the best at what the best you can be as a creative?
As a creative, you have to admit that you don't know everything, and there's always more to learn, especially the business side of writing.
Yes.
Yeah, there's always more to learn about the business side. There's always new formulas for crafting stories and the basic fundamentals. And then you're always learning about yourself and expanding your own knowledge, which helps you world build, especially when you're dealing with sci-fi.
Mhm. And Rasheedah, what about you?
Repeat the question for me, please.
I think it was, in terms of being a creative, what is the most important thing that you've learned as a creative?
Patience. I think that's,
patience?
That's the number one and most important thing, to be very patient with myself, with people that I work with, the whole process. Just knowing that it's about just taking the time, getting it right, and understanding that people you're working with are human. Mistakes can be made, will be made. You just you fix them and you recover and you move forward, and you just be very patient with how things progress.
Okay, and Tanece?
What Rasheedah said earlier, said just be patient, but also be open to criticism and just, feedback in general, because a lot of the time people are just trying to help you become a better artist and be better at your craft. And don't be afraid to make mistakes and just, try things out differently, try different things, because you never know. It might help, it might, give you new ideas or give you a different perspective of how to do things, basically. So just don't be afraid to try new things.
And what about you, Kenyeda?
For me, it's definitely learn to take criticism because people are trying to help you be a better writer, and to trust your own skills. I think, because I think one of the biggest challenges I have is just putting out there what I have and not necessarily nitpicking over every little detail, but, just letting the story tell itself.
Mm-hmm. And there is one more. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And just trust that, you can tell that story. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah. And there is one more question from the chat room, and it is, what famous author's book do you wish you had written and why? Kenyeda, let's start with you real quick.
Okay. Oh, that's easy. I would have rewritten the Harry Potter books simply because there were some relationships that I felt like she could have really explored that she really didn't. Okay.
And Tanece, what famous author's book do you wish you had written and why?
The first one that came to mind was Brave Story by Miyuki Miyabe. Like, it's something about growing up in childhood in that story that I wish I had written, or I wish I had written so it could be turned into some show because it was into a movie. Like, that's the first thing that came to mind. I was like, man, I wish I wrote Brave Story. So that's mine.
Rasheedah?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I admire a lot of writers. I think maybe one of the stories that impressed me the most was written by B.C. Andrews. I don't necessarily think I would want to write that, but I think that she just had a way of writing that was different and completely unique and all her own. But she would be the one that I admire the most.
Right. And Ellen, what about you? What famous author's book do you wish you had written, and why is that?
I honestly can't really think of a book. I don't know. Maybe it would be awesome to have written Dune by Frank Herbert. I mean, that'd be cool to be the author of that. I mean, I just like the world building, cool. Everything about it. Yeah, probably Dune from Frank Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, talk about world building,
Right.
That was pretty amazing. For me, I don't know if the guy's name. Well, I would have liked to have written the Britannica Encyclopedia, and because that would mean that I knew a lot more than I know now. And that's partially cynical, but it's also partially right. I mean, I like my writing to have a lot of things in it. I want it to be rich. I want it to be full. I want it to also include things that other people might not have thought about or didn't know. So, but if I were to be really honest, I would have loved to have written Snow Crash by Stevenson. I think it is. Yeah, Neil. Or was it Gibson? I forget. I would have to look it up. Somebody else can look it up. We're about 2 minutes before the end of the show, and Jarvis couldn't be with us last week. And what I want to do is have him come in, and if he'll be here, so that he could take us out of the show. And then, of course, after we stop the recording, hang on, guys, just in case anybody has any last-minute stuff. Yeah, it was Neil Stevenson. So I don't know if Jarvis is downstairs getting a sandwich or what he's doing, but normally I want to remind everybody that this show starts every Friday, or most every Friday, at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Goes for 2 hours. I think it's the best interview show on the Internet, and not because I have anything to do with it, but because it gives the people who we interview more than 8 minutes to talk about what they do. I've done some radio shows. I've done some TV shows, for my writing. And, the most you get is 8, maybe 10 minutes to try to convey to people what you are, and it's hard to do more than that. And I guess, Jarvis is not, oh, there he is. You there?
Hello.
Yes. You want to take us out?
Oh, with me, it's just I want to send a sincere thanks out to everyone involved in this, whether you're on the show or just tuning in, because it's really appreciated. It's something that was stated several times, was that this site is a place that I haven't seen before, where other people like me congregate. And we want that really touches me, because that's the main purpose of this, to pull together people of like mind to work together to develop Black science fiction. And so I want to thank everybody involved in this, and to continue to support what we're doing. Come on the site, tell people about what we're doing, share the site with others, and so it can continue to grow and we can continue to do more and more. So, like I said, I just really want to thank everyone for participating, and especially the ladies. We always want to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable for the material that we're doing, and making sure that we represent our women in a positive light, because a lot of times that in sci-fi and in television, period, Black women don't get the credit that they're due, and also are portrayed in negative roles. And I'm really tired of that. So you ladies doing your thing is awesome. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll keep putting out and sharing what you're doing.
So, on that note, I want to thank all of you, Kenyeda, Tanece, Rasheedah, Ellen. Thank you for coming on, and I hope I didn't talk too much. Somebody there thought I was talking too much, but they can get their own. They can get their own show. But thank you, ladies, very much for participating, and we'll see you around the site. And for those of you who are listening to this as a podcast and have not joined BlackScienceFictionSociety.com, why don't you join? Sign up. Look at the content we have. Look at the people we have. It is probably one of the most unique sites on the Internet. So on behalf of Jarvis, everybody, ladies, I would like to wish everybody a good evening, and thank everybody for coming.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye.